So now I turn to Martin Brechbiel, MMR, for his scratch building corner. Martin, welcome.
Evening, Jim, and everyone else. Let's see if we can get this to behave. Oh my goodness, it is behaving. How unusual. Well, where were we? Oh, we haven't started yet, so I don't know where we are. We're going to start something new tonight. And I threatened or promised, take your choice, a rarity from me, an actual prototype car. This happens about once a decade in my shop, give or take a decade. I don't build very many prototype cars, loosely based upon, frequently, fictitious creations, quite regularly, fanciful oddities, even more frequently. But an actual prototype car, maybe 5 or 6 have come out of my shop in the last 20 years. So this will be a bit of an adventure. We're going to start with this. There's an article. I ran across this and I thought, well, that's a suitably strange or different and unusual car. It's not an oil tank car like those that used to be touted as oil cars in early Pennsylvania history, but this is a water car on the Uintah. And as they say in the first sentence, was an unusual railroad. So that immediately strikes home chords with me. If it's unusual, I find a place for it. And I thought, well, I should have one just for the fun of it. So we have upright wooden water tanks on a flat car. And I have a long-standing affinity for making barrels. There must have been a cooper in a prior life, once upon a time. Been making barrels and things of that nature all my life, actually. I rebuilt, well, I think one of the first things I ever rebuilt with a barrel was actually a butter churn, upright butter churn. So this is an old article. It's in Narrow Gauge Shortline Gazette. I was scanning them in because I'm clearing off that shelf out of my library because I've run out of shelf space. So something has to give. And this the pre-90s volunteered to vacate the premises, but that was after they went through the scanner. And I found, oh, there's an article and there's an article, and that looks silly. We might build one of those someday. I don't know when. But this one surfaced right at the top. So where do you start when you build something like this? Well, in the plumbing supplies, of all places. And I have no idea what this really is. Drain line, it was piece of drain line that was out in the shed up at my house in Pennsylvania. In the fire, next to the firewood, the leftover from when I had the new plumbing lines and drain lines put in the bathroom and kitchen up there a couple of years ago. And this was a piece of leftover stuff. And I said, I should bring that home with me. I may find a use for this someday. And it was sitting in the corner of my shop in a rack. And I thought, that looks to be about the right size. And after measuring it versus one of my generic flat cars, I thought, that looks about right, give or take a little bit. And plus or minus a little bit, we can get away with that because there were no dimensions given in that plan. Or no plans in that article. There's just pictures and somebody built their own version of it. And so you sort of have a little, not a little, you have a lot of freedom to just get creative and wing it. So, piece of plumbing. And you can buy this stuff at Home Depot in like a 2-foot length or pre-cut to that. So you don't have to go and buy an 8-foot piece of tubing, which is actually useful to have if you want to build a lot of tank cars. But If you only want to build something small, well, you can get a 2-foot piece. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Maybe a couple of toes. Well, then what do? Well, you slice off 3 sections. You need 3 tanks. I did this on the bandsaw. Just roll it through the bandsaw. I have a 12-inch bandsaw with a 1/2-inch blade. Does a fairly decent job. Take your time and, like I said, I roll it through the blade. Still sanded flat and even. 60 grit paper on a hunk of 2x4, working it in a figure 8. You work it in a figure 8 so you end up getting a level surface. What my machinist 3 floors below me when I used to have a job taught me. Work it in a figure 8. It'll come out flat. Okay, that takes a little more coordination than most of us have, so I just do it clockwise, counterclockwise, and I go left-handed and do it counterclockwise and clockwise until I say, that's close enough, we'll stop there. Well, we got to put some boards on our pieces of plumbing. This is just 3x stock. I think it's 3x7s and maybe a stray 3x6 here and there to make it come out even. Just glue these on there. Set the first one with a square. Get it straight, top to bottom. And then it's CA, cyanoacrylate glue. You do a couple, let it set, do a couple, let it set, do a couple, let it set. I actually put them on there. They were a little long. And then I sanded them down on that same sanding block. And then you get a nice flush surface top and bottom. So you get a nice finish. And this makes a pretty sturdy barrel. They don't pop off very easily when you use the CA. And that's not basswood, actually. I think it's mainly pine. I got a bunch of pine lumber from Kapler before they changed hands. So we'll make some tops. Okay, this is just 3x stock, 3-inch stock. It's edge glued together. And I used a lot of scraps left over from doing the sides of the barrels. Just glue it all up. It's close to covering the top. Now we just have to shape it to the right dimensions. I didn't glue it on right away. In fact, didn't glue it on until very, very late. But so I just flip this over and take a pencil, mechanical pencil, 1/2 millimeter lead in it, and scribe a line, and then just sand it to that line. And I use a 4-inch upright belt sander, and then a sanding stick, and then a sanding block and sanding sponge until I say, well, that's round, or close enough to round that nobody's going to care. Okay, so there we have the tops. And we put some framing across them, as in the photos in that article. And there's a little hatch in the middle. This is all 3x stock again. And there's some 2x stock in making up the hatch. That handle on that has that little open archway in it for reaching in there with your hand. You need a place to get a hold of it. And that's really easy to, actually, it's very easy to do. You just put the a little drum sander in your Dremel, and just carve out a little handle. It's very easy to do. In O-scale, it matches up. It's not quite right. It's wider than the actual drum, but just a little bit of sanding works fine. These tops aren't glued down yet either, by the way. And there's more pieces that go on there. Those are just the tops. There's other cross members that actually hold these on down. So they're still loose. They're just resting there, resting quietly, waiting for the inevitable, which will be probably glue and goo and CA and weights and more things. There's cross members that actually mount these to the car. And I think we'll probably end up doing that next week. And we will. We will do that next week because we need a flat car. We need a car to put these on. I can guarantee you I'm going to spend only one slide on a flat car, maybe 2. because I talked about building a flat car about 300 times. But mounting the barrels is going to be a little more interesting. So we'll have fun with that. And that's where we're stopping for this week. So any questions? Scream
Any
now.
questions for Martin?
Martin, I noticed
Martin,
on the prototype car,
Yeah.
it had those high glad hands on it.
Yes, it does.
Are you going to do that?
Yep. Those parts are actually available. Believe it or not, somebody actually sells those still. Unusual. It just makes an interesting final detail part on that car that makes it very unique looking. Now, not that the tanks themselves aren't unique enough, but those glad hands on the ends. If you read the article, it actually brings that point up, and apparently, the people who worked on the Uintah thought that was totally normal. They were more of the mind that doesn't everybody do that? And then it turns out, no, you're the only railroad that does that. You're unique. Apparently, they were unique, at least. There may be others. I don't know them. But those parts are actually available as brass castings, and we can get them. We'll talk about those next week, or the
Looking
week
forward
after,
to it.
or the week after that. I'm not sure. It depends how fast I go, or how much I procrastinate as I present.
Hey, Martin,
Martin, what was the diameter of the pipe you used?
Oh, bugger. I don't know. I'd have to go look it up. So, well, it's either two and a quarter, 2.5, somewhere in that range. You know, I actually, if you really wait for it, I'll go over to my shop and come back and let you know. I'll send you, I'll put it in the chat for you. I mean, I've still got enough laying back there somewhere.
Martin, I don't have a question, but I do have a little comment.
Yes, sir.
I also like to use that tubing when I make some sort of a tank car or something. And a while back, I invested in this tool that's used to cut that stuff. And you can buy them at Harbor Freight. They're pretty cheap. It looks like a big pair of pliers, but it's got a blade in it. And
Yeah.
I think they'll cut up to like 1.5 inch tubing. And if you do that, I don't really have to sand it then. It cuts it off, really square, and I don't even have to sand after that.
Yeah, well, this tubing is closer to 2. This is at least 2 inches. So, and I already have invested in 40 years ago, invested in a bandsaw. So, it's sitting there it's literally right behind my chair at the one workstation in my shop. So I have to shove the chair out of the way to use it, but it's literally right there. So, you can cut that stuff with a bandsaw. You can cut it on a table saw if you really want to. You can cut plastic. You just have to be a little careful, but it's not impossible.
I take it with me to the home center to buy that stuff, and then I can fit it in the car. I cut it in half.
Yeah, well, I know they sell like 2-foot sections. So, if you want to be frugal and buy a 2-foot section, that's all you need. Or you can buy an 8-foot section and let it hang out the window and come home and make 10 tank cars.
Martin, thank you so very much. Look forward to.
I got to go measure a piece of pipe. I'll be back.
Got